You know, some artists and bands from the classic rock period are so iconic and so well known that their stories have been told over and over again. And I kind of figured that maybe there was no need for me to deal with those iconic bands specifically, giving them an episode. But I guess I was wrong because one of my viewers suggested that I focus on this next band. Now, they were a great band, and I'm going to tell you a lot about them, but obviously I'm not going to be able to tell their complete story. But I can tell you about the music, the memories, and the times I saw them live, and what a great band they were. Let's go surfing now. Everybody's learning how. Come on a safari with me. Let's get started as we talk about the Beach Boys. Now, I discovered that if I'm going to cover such a seminal and influential band as the Beach Boys, I can't do it just in one episode. So I'm going to break it into multiple parts and hope you stay through all of them because it is an incredible story. The band was formed in 1961 with three brothers, a cousin, and a friend. And they released their first album with hits on it in 1962. And they released their most current album in 2012. They created what became called California music. It was songs about surfing, hot rod cars, and girls. And it inspired kids from all over the world, including myself, to want to live in Southern California. Two of the brothers in this band have died, and the one brother, who was called the Genius, has been battling mental health issues for years. Currently, he tours on his own, and then his cousin tours with a band, ironically, that he still calls the Beach Boys. The Beatles even admit to a friendly rivalry with Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys in that Pet Sounds inspired the Beatles to record Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And Paul McCartney has gone on to say that one of Brian Wilson's songs with the Beach Boys is the most perfect song ever written. So let's take a look at the Beach Boys. Let's go out to sunny Southern California. Let's catch a wave, and let's drop the needle. The Beach Boys story starts with three brothers, Brian, Dennis, and Carl, all sharing the same bedroom in Hawthorne, California. And a neighbor, David Marks. Now, Brian had a tape recorder, so he taught his brothers and David how to sing harmonies, and he actually overdubbed them on the tape recorder. Brian was hearing harmonies in his head that nobody else had thought of. To flesh out the group, he approached his cousin, Mike Love, to join the group as well. Now, Dennis Wilson was really the only surfer of the brothers, but he convinced Brian that surfing was going to be a big thing and that Brian should be writing songs about surfing. So Brian sat down and wrote Surfing, and then he and Mike Love wrote Surfing Safari. The Beach Boys played their first live gig on New Year's Eve 1961 in Long Beach, California. And at that time, they wore long Pendleton jacket shirts, because that's what surfers were wearing at the time. And they wore those until they changed to their trademark striped shirts, which they took from the Kingston Trio, who also kind of dressed the same way. They got signed by Capitol Records, and based on their hit of the single Surfin' Safari, recorded their first album, which was released in 1962, which is called Surfin' Safari. It contains the title track, Surfin' Safari, and I like 409, Surfin', and even their cover of Summertime Blues. But they're just getting started, and the Beach Boys have a history of turning out album after album. So just 3 months later, they go back in the studio and record their second album called Surfin' USA. It contains the hit title, Surfin' USA, and Shutdown. But then I also like The Lonely Sea. At this time, Brian started attending recording sessions and even playing piano on some of them for Phil Spector. Now, Brian's piano playing, I think, didn't make the cut, but Brian was absolutely blown away with what Phil Spector was doing in the studio, and he decided he was going to try to incorporate that into the sound of the Beach Boys. And their next album really started to show that happening, and it was called Little Surfer Girl. Again, there are lush harmonies from the group and a lot more instrumentation. Standouts are the title, Little Surfer Girl. Who could not like that? Little Do Scoop, and the very introspective In My Room. Like I said, they were prolific. Just 3 weeks later, they released their next album, Little Do Scoop. This album can be considered a car concept album. In fact, some of the tracks had already been released on previous recordings. There's Little Do Scoop, Be True to Your School, 409, and Shutdown. The album sold well, reaching number 4 on the charts. And this became a pattern with their label, Capitol Records. Throughout the years, Capitol would release many compilation albums, many best-of albums, and some live albums. And basically, I'm not going to talk about those. I'm really just going to focus on the Beach Boys studio albums, which there are a ton of. At the end of the year, David Marks has left the group, and Al Jardine joins permanently. But then there was a monumental sea change, and it had nothing to do with the tides or the ocean. In fact, it came halfway around the world from Southern California, from Liverpool. And yes, it was the Beatles. How the British invasion, and particularly the Beatles, impacted Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys, I'll discuss in the next episode. Now, as usual, I've created a playlist on Spotify for the music that I've talked about in this episode, so you can check that out. And if you liked the start of the Beach Boys story, stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching, and keep a rockin'. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.